is still with thee, nor leaves thy sight. And I am thine, I rest in thee. Great Spirit, come and rest in me. The ends of the earth are in thy hands. The seas dark, deep, and far off lands. And I am the I rest in thee. Great Spirit, come and rest in me. Our opening words come from the screenplay of the Hobbit, the film, The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey. And these words come from the authors of that screenplay, Fran Walsh, Philippa Boyens, Phil Jackson, and Guillermo del Toro. And they said, through the mouth of the wizard in this story, Gandalf, the wise wisdom keeper of the film, some believe it is only great power that can hold evil in check. But that is not what I have found. I've found it is the small things, everyday deeds of ordinary folk that keep the darkness at bay. Small acts of kindness and love. We have a guest at the Shalom Center where I work, the day center program of Beacon, where I work. And she struggles with severe mental illness. And she has these regular hallucinations, and often has conversations with these hallucinations, often has an active engagement with and conversation with these hallucinations that she experiences. And one of the things I was taught early in this work about this type of mental illness, and I try always to remember, is that for the person having the hallucination, it is not fake. It is absolutely real to them. So while I recognize it's a creation of their own mind, I also feel the need to treat that truth for that person with respect. And the other day, I overheard this guest speaking to this person I could not see. And the person she was seeing was clearly saying some awful things to her. And she kept repeatedly yelling back to this person something like, would you like to walk in my shoes for a while? Would you like to walk in my shoes for a while? And I found the moment both startling and moving. Here she was having a relationship, a very clear relationship with a hallucination, a very real relationship with real dialogue and real exchange. And at the same time, she had this deep awareness of her own struggles and suffering and could express that. She was aware of the pain she was in and having, and she was defending herself from the judgment she was experiencing. It was like two worlds colliding. And it reminded me so clear that people experiencing hallucinations are also very much present to what else is going on in our world. Some years ago, I was at a housing conference and a woman walked up to the mic on the stage, and she was very well dressed and carried herself with a gentle confidence. My first thought was another social services person was about to give us a talk. But then she began to tell us about her experiences with schizophrenia. She described having visions of armies that were coming after her, and how they told her that they would kill anyone that she got close to. These armies would kill anyone that she got close to. So she isolated herself, a very, I think, natural response to that kind of experience. And in order to protect those that she cared about, she just separated herself from everyone that she cared about and wouldn't let anyone else in, to care for her, or to develop caring affections for her in order to protect them. Years later, though, through some very fortunate connections with some medical professionals on the street, she began to take medication to help with her illness, and actually amazingly soon began to recover. And she shared that she remembered from that time. She shared later, as she was speaking from the mic, the stage in front of us. She shared that she remembered very little from that time, over 5 years in total, and most of that experience was gone from her memory. But she did remember of two types of experiences: when people were cruel to her and when people were kind to her. And I think about that with this guest at our center, that the fullness of who she is there waiting to emerge, and that in her state of psychosis, in her state of hallucination, that she is still quite aware of those of us around her and how we treat her. Small kindnesses. Another guest of ours at the center, she's actually now a former guest. She's no longer a guest at the center. She's actually been in recovery for several years after struggling with substance use issues, and now works in social services to help people who struggled like she did. She was homeless for more than 7 years, and her decline began with prescription opioids to help with pain. Over time, she developed an addiction to those prescriptions, and at one point, she had many different prescriptions from different doctors and different pharmacies all over town. This was the time when it was far less regulated, these prescription opioids. And that eventually caught up with her. All those different prescriptions and doctors eventually caught up with her, and eventually ran out, and she switched to injecting heroin. She lost her job in the process. She lost her children, and she eventually even lost her home in a fire. Her first night homeless, she slept out on a hill in Bloomington with several teenagers who were also struggling with substance use. That image just struck me as very poignant. Just hanging out on a hill, being on a hill with some teenagers. This older mom being helped out by some teens on her first night alone and outside. One abandoned group of people helping another abandoned group, another abandoned person. And she spent many years living outside in the wooded areas of our town, often harassed by police or hostile people. She grew wary of strangers, and she camped further away and deeper in the woods. One of our caseworkers went out to her camp, and as his footsteps were heard coming up the path, she was very worried he was a police officer and she was going to be told to leave. But this caseworker just offered some care and a friendly connection, some help, and slowly built trust with her over time through this first meeting and many to come in the future. And she said that he offered two very important things to her: love and choice. He came offering care and support, and he didn't come with an agenda to be forced upon her. And she said those two gifts combined eventually led to her recovery. When entering a recovery program sometime later, she was asked on an intake survey, "Who loves you?" And she couldn't think of a name to answer that question, except the name of this caseworker. "Yeah," she said, "he loves me." She described the experience years later in a way that hit me right in the chest. She said, "A lot of people loved me when I was doing well. A lot of people loved me when I was doing well, but you were the only ones who loved me when I wasn't." This person, sober now for several years, now has a house. She has a job in social service work, and she is even getting married very soon. Small kindnesses. I adopted a puppy a few weeks ago, and he is an extremely cute wrecking ball of chaos. And I've had dogs my whole life, but he's actually the first puppy I've ever tried to raise. And before picking him, I looked at several other dogs, all older and I imagine easier. But I think what ultimately got me to choose this little guy was that I did, in fact, want to raise a puppy. I wanted to be with an animal from the beginning, seeing him through those younger years, which I'd always missed with all the other dogs in my life. I'm not naive enough to realize that this probably also has a bit to do with raising myself. I don't want to over psychologize here, but I'm very aware that all of us on some level try to redo our childhoods, try to heal those parts of our younger selves that were injured the first time we went through. Personally, and I imagine I'm not alone in this, but one of the things that I struggle with often is feelings of failure or feelings of failure. Again, I'm sure I'm not the only one that struggles with that. And the weight of that can often be quite heavy. I often especially feel like that in relationship to my work, that there's not enough money, that there's not enough time, and I'm always behind, and I'm always falling short, and I'm always not enough. And I think I've shared with you before that also just the last year or so that I've been starting to see a trauma therapist occasionally to deal with some of the trauma of my work. And in doing so, we use this technique called EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which aids in the process of traumatic feelings and memories. It's basically a process of eye movement that helps you actually integrate painful memories and painful experiences so that you can heal. And in that session when recently I was working with those feelings of failure with the therapist, and I just mentioned, and it manifested that feeling kind of manifested as a dullness around my chest and a pain in my back. But as we were starting to work, we went into the feelings, and as that happens, sometimes other sensations, images, and memories start to emerge. And in this case, as we went into those feelings and started to look at that, I began to feel another feeling. I began to feel first a buzz in my shoulders and arms as the isolated feelings in my chest began to move. And then I saw an image, which was kind of an old, kind of Kodachrome photo of a little boy who didn't look like me, so I didn't think it was me. But as I felt into it, I realized that this was some kind of subconscious version of myself. And then as I kept going, memories started to emerge and began to center around my childhood home and my childhood dog. I started to have memories of my childhood dog, my very first home, my very first dog, who we gave away because he was aggressive with children. Not with me. I loved that dog, but we gave him away because he was unsafe with children, including the neighbors and such. And as I processed this memory, while I was in therapy, I just started to feel enormous feelings of guilt and sadness emerging over this dog. Not being able to protect this dog, to keep him safe, to keep him home. And I was just a pup myself. I was just a little boy. I was maybe 5 or 6, taking responsibility for this situation with this dog, feeling like a failure, feeling like I failed him. It's amazing. It's truly amazing where our minds can take us. That was not what I expected when I walked into that session with that therapy. I was feeling some anxiety and fear in my chest, and somehow it turned into that story. an experience I barely realized had any impact on me. And yet here I am carrying that loss nearly 50 years later, and perhaps adopting a puppy because of it. Another attempt of my psyche to ensure the little ones of the world have a home. Jesus told us, whatsoever you do for the least of us, you do for me. Puppies, people on the streets, little boys who hurt over a lost dog. Small kindnesses. There are so many challenges in this world, challenges that can easily overwhelm us, make us feel like failures, like we're not enough. And truthfully, we aren't. But we're also not alone. Some believe it is only great power that can hold evil in check. But that is not what I have found. I have found it is the small things, everyday deeds of ordinary folk that keep the darkness at bay. Small acts of kindness and love. I was having a conversation recently at a local fundraising event with a gentleman there, and he said to me something that I've heard many times before in reference to my work, and it comes up a lot, where they'll say, "I don't know how you do it," like I'm some kind of special creature or something, some kind of special being that can do this work and everybody else can't. It's um, but trying to sympathize with that, and I told them, I said, for lack of better words, it's love. When we allow ourselves to have love, it overcomes the sorrow and the loss and the fear and the hurt and even the threat. Love is the restoration. Love is what holds it all together and makes it all possible. I said, for lack of better words, because love is not an answer we're used to. It's something we can say in church, like we are right now, but it's not something that fits into our out there lives as much, especially in our professional lives. But it's an honest answer, and it's a practical answer. And it's an answer I have to keep, and I think all of us have to keep renewing again and again, because the suffering can be overwhelming. But it's not special. I'm not special. How do I do it? How does anyone do it? By allowing love to be the renewing force in your life. By allowing love to be the renewing force in your life. Love is something we allow. Love is something we trust. Love is something we receive by opening and opening and opening again. Small kindnesses. Small acts of kindness and love.